No, he said he's very brusque. He's a marvelous man. He's very brusque, and he said, I want to test her. And they said, what? This girl's never acted professionally.
Nancy Kulp appeared in 274 episodes of the Beverly Hillbillies, but it was a 60-second radio ad that defined her relationship with co-star Buddy Ebsen forever. What Buddy did was cruel and unnecessary, she said in her final interview. Now, the truth emerges about their explosive rivalry, from their first day on set to the shocking betrayal that tore them apart. This is the real story behind TV's most unexpected enemies. Let's start with Nancy. Nancy Kulp was born on August 28, 1921, in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Her father, Robert, was a traveling salesman, and her mother, Marjorie, was a teacher who later became a principal. Her parents were very different. One was always on the move, while the other was focused on education. These differences shaped Nancy's early life and influenced who she became. When Nancy was 5, her family moved to a small town called Mifflintown, Pennsylvania. Life there was quiet and close-knit, a big change from the busyness of Harrisburg. With only about 1,000 people in town, Nancy learned to observe others and developed a sharp sense of humor. These would later help her as an actress. But the family didn't stay long. Before 1935, they moved again, this time to Miami, Florida. The move to Miami was a huge change. It was a lively, growing city, full of energy and opportunity. This contrast from the small-town life Nancy had known helped her adapt to different environments and people. It also prepared her for her future, where she would have to play all sorts of characters. In 1943, Nancy graduated from Florida State College for Women, now Florida State University, with a degree in journalism. She was 22 and already interested in storytelling and connecting with people. At the time, the school was focused on empowering women, which shaped Nancy's ambitions. She was also active in campus life, joining a sorority called Pi Beta Phi. Moreover, Nancy worked at a newspaper called the Miami Beach Tropics. Her job as a feature writer gave her the chance to meet and interview some of the most famous people of the time. She talked to Clark Gable, one of Hollywood's biggest stars, and the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, whose romance fascinated the world. Nancy also wrote about Myrna Loy and Errol Flynn, getting a glimpse into the glamorous world of entertainment. These experiences may have planted the idea of working in Hollywood one day. Later in her acting career, Nancy joked that her experience interviewing celebrities might have inspired one of her roles. She once played an English maid in an episode of I Love Lucy, and taught Lucy and Ethel how to curtsy for the Queen. In 1944, when Nancy Kulp was just 23, she made a brave choice to join the WAVES program, which was part of the U.S. Naval Reserve. This decision interrupted her studies at the University of Miami, where she was working on her master's degree in English and French, after finishing a journalism degree at Florida State University. Nancy quickly climbed the ranks in the WAVES, becoming a lieutenant junior grade in just 2 years. She did important work like breaking codes, handling communications, and working in naval intelligence. Her sharp thinking and attention to detail, which she had developed during her journalism studies, made her a valuable part of the team. She even earned medals for her service, like the American Campaign Medal and the World War II Victory Medal. One of the most interesting parts of Nancy's time in the WAVES was when she worked at the Naval Air Station in Jacksonville, Florida. There, she worked alongside a young naval aviator named George H.W. Bush. Yes, the man who would later become President of the United States. Nancy liked to joke that she outranked him at the time. She was honorably discharged from the Navy in 1946, after contributing so much to the war effort. In 1951, Nancy's life took a big turn. She moved to Hollywood on April 1st, April Fool's Day, and she loved to joke that the date matched her unpredictable career. At first, She didn't plan on becoming an actress. Instead, she wanted to work behind the scenes. With her journalism skills and the connections she'd made during the war, she got a job in MGM's publicity department. Her job was busy and full of challenges. She wrote press releases, organized interviews, and made sure MGM's stars stayed in the spotlight. One of her favorite assignments was working on the publicity for the movie An American in Paris. She spent hours convincing reporters that Gene Kelly really danced with an animated mouse, even though everyone knew it was special effects. Nancy worked with some of the biggest stars at MGM, like Clark Gable, Ava Gardner, and Spencer Tracy. Her sharp wit and no-nonsense attitude made her stand out. That same year, on the exact day she started at MGM, Nancy got married to Charles Malcolm Dacus. Their marriage didn't last long. They divorced in 1961, and she never remarried. But the timing of their wedding and her job always sparked curiosity. Nancy's move into acting happened completely by chance. One day, while she was organizing a press event, legendary director George Cukor overheard her joking with journalists. He was so impressed by her humor and unique voice that he told her she should be in front of the camera, not behind it. He even gave her informal acting lessons and helped her learn the ropes. Cukor introduced her to other people in the industry and encouraged her to take small acting roles. Her first role came in 1951 in the movie The Model and the Marriage Broker. She played Hazel, a shy woman who hires a marriage broker to find her a husband. George Cukor fought hard to get her the role, even though some people at MGM weren't sure she was ready. He made her do a screen test where she had to perform a dramatic scene while balancing a book on her head and eating a banana. She nailed it, and even the skeptics were impressed. Nancy's first day on set wasn't easy. She had to cry on cue for her scene, but she was so nervous that she couldn't do it. To help, the director used an old Hollywood trick. He blew menthol powder into her eyes to make her cry. Even though it was a tough start, Nancy gave a great performance. When the movie premiered later that year, critics loved her small but memorable role. They even said she had a bright future ahead. In 1953, she appeared in the movie Shane. She played Mrs. Howells, a homesteader's wife, in a very short role, just over 3 minutes of screen time. But her performance was powerful. In one unforgettable scene, she stood up to the bad guy, Rufus Riker, and told him, "This land is as much ours as yours, Mr. Riker. You have no right to drive us out." It was a short line, but it showed her strength and determination. People remembered her, and so did the movie industry. The next year, in 1954, she was in Sabrina, a romantic comedy directed by Billy Wilder. This time, she played Jenny, a maid in the Larrabee household. It was another small role, and she wasn't even credited in the film. Still, her scenes were funny and charming. One of the most memorable moments was when she exclaimed, "If Miss Julia's soufflé isn't ready in 5 minutes, I'll be forced to serve the raspberry sherbet." It made people laugh, and even though her role was tiny, it got her noticed by critics and fans alike. These two roles, though brief, gave her career a big boost. Her big break came in 1955 when she joined The Bob Cummings Show, also known as Love That Bob. She played Pamela Livingstone, a quirky bird-watching neighbor with a crush on Bob Collins, the main character. Pamela was a fun, eccentric character, and Nancy made her unforgettable. Her catchphrase, "Ooh, Bob," in her unique, slightly nasal voice, became one of the show's highlights. Fans loved it, and her fan mail even increased by 22% after one especially funny episode. In that episode, Pamela tries to use reverse psychology on Bob, which leads to hilarious misunderstandings. Critics also loved her performance, calling her comedic timing perfect. This role made her a household name and opened doors to other TV opportunities. Nancy's talent didn't stop at comedy. She showed she could do serious roles, too. She appeared twice on Perry Mason, a popular legal drama. In one episode, she played a key witness in a murder trial, showing vulnerability and strength at the same time. Critics praised her for her ability to make her characters feel real. Then, in 1962, she did something very different. She was in an episode of The Twilight Zone called The Fugitive. She played a strict aunt who disapproved of her niece's alien friend. This was far from her usual funny roles, but she nailed it. The episode was one of the most watched of the season, and it helped her get more dramatic roles. Nancy also appeared on other popular shows like The Real McCoys and The Jack Benny Program. No matter how small the part, she always made an impact. On the other hand, Buddy Ebsen's journey began in an unexpected way. Born Christian Ludolph Ebsen Jr. on April 2, 1908, in Orlando, Florida, he grew up in his father's dance studio. As a boy, he didn't enjoy dancing and even thought it was sissified, but things changed when he turned 20. In 1928, with only $26.75 in his pocket, Buddy went to New York City, dreaming of a better life. His first job was working as a soda jerk, but his dancing skills soon got him noticed. On September 14, 1928, he auditioned for the Broadway show Whoopee and got a spot in the chorus line. This was the start of nearly a decade of performing on Broadway and in vaudeville. Buddy's big break came when he teamed up with his sister, Vilma. They became a famous dance duo called the Baby Astairs. Buddy's tall, lanky body and unique, loose-limbed dance style made their act stand out. On February 22, 1931, they made their Broadway debut in flying colors, earning great reviews. Their biggest moment came on January 4, 1934, when they performed in the Ziegfeld Follies of 1934. One night, during a show at the Paradise Restaurant in Atlantic City, famous columnist Walter Winchell saw their performance. His glowing review got them booked at the Palace Theater in New York City on March 10, 1934, which was a dream for all vaudeville performers. Hollywood came calling in 1935. MGM scouts, impressed by the siblings' Broadway success, offered them a 2-year contract on June 15, 1935, paying $1,500 a week each, a huge amount at the time. Buddy and Vilma made their film debut in Broadway Melody of 1936, released on September 20, 1935. But this was Vilma's only movie, as she left show business due to contract problems. Buddy, however, stayed and thrived. In Hollywood, Buddy appeared in many films in the late 1930s, often showing off his dancing skills. On April 24, 1936, he danced with Shirley Temple in Captain January. Later that year, on November 27th, he starred in Born to Dance with Eleanor Powell. One of his most memorable performances was with Judy Garland in Broadway Melody of 1938, released on August 20, 1937. Buddy's gangly, fluid movements made him unique. Walt Disney was so impressed with his dancing that on March 3, 1938, he had Buddy perform in front of a grid to help animate Mickey Mouse's movements for the Silly Symphonies cartoons. One of the strangest chapters of Buddy's life happened with The Wizard of Oz. In 1938, MGM cast him as the Scarecrow. But on August 12, 1938, he agreed to switch roles with Ray Bolger, who wanted to play the Scarecrow. Buddy took on the role of the Tin Man and started filming on October 21, 1938. His makeup, made of pure aluminum powder, caused a terrible allergic reaction. After 9 days of filming, Buddy became seriously ill, struggling to breathe. On October 30th, 1938, he was rushed to the hospital and spent 2 weeks in an oxygen tent. The aluminum powder had coated his lungs, making it hard for his blood to absorb oxygen. At first, MGM didn't believe Buddy was sick, but a nurse confirmed how serious it was. By the time Buddy recovered, Jack Haley had replaced him as the Tin Man, and the makeup had been changed to a safer aluminum paste. Buddy's voice, however, remains in the film's song, "We're Off to See the Wizard," a haunting reminder of what might have been. This experience left Buddy with lifelong breathing problems and a deep bitterness toward the film, which he often called "that damned movie." After his health scare with The Wizard of Oz, Buddy Ebsen's acting career slowed down. In the 1940s and early 1950s, he only appeared in a few films, mostly in small roles in low-budget movies. Things changed completely for him on May 15, 1954, when Walt Disney cast him as George Russell in the Davy Crockett miniseries. This role gave his career a fresh start and brought him more TV appearances through the late 1950s. The biggest moment of Ebsen's career came on September 26, 1962, with the premiere of The Beverly Hillbillies on CBS. At 54 years old, Ebsen played Jed Clampett, the head of a poor family from the Ozarks who becomes rich after striking oil and moves to Beverly Hills. The show became a huge hit, with one episode in 1964 pulling in 57 million viewers, a record that stood for over 20 years. Interestingly, Ebsen almost didn't take the role. In early 1962, he was thinking about retiring when Paul Henning, the show's creator, reached out. Henning had seen Ebsen in Breakfast at Tiffany's and thought he was perfect for Jed. Ebsen, unsure about the project, asked for a very high salary, thinking they'd refuse. To his surprise, they agreed. On March 15, 1962, Ebsen signed the contract that shaped the rest of his life. The same year, Nancy Kulp joined the Beverly Hillbillies as Miss Jane Hathaway. Her first appearance was in the premiere episode, The Clampetts Strike Oil, on September 26, 1962. Playing the organized and proper bank secretary who interacts with the Clampett family, Kulp instantly stood out. Audiences loved her, and it was clear this role was a perfect match for her talent. At the time, Kulp was close to quitting acting and had even applied to universities to study linguistics. But after a long conversation with Paul Henning, she decided to give acting one last try. Casting her as Miss Jane was a brilliant decision. Her background in character roles, combined with her sharp humor and great timing, brought something special to the show. Initially, Miss Jane was supposed to be a simple character, mostly there to balance the Clampetts' silliness. But Kulp's performance brought the role to life, and the writers expanded her character. By the end of the first season, Miss Jane had become a central figure in the show. One of the running jokes, her unreturned crush on Jethro Bodine, played by Max Baer Jr., was Kulp's own suggestion. She felt it would add more layers to her character and make the show even funnier. Kulp's work as Miss Jane earned her critical praise. In 1967, during the show's 5th season, she was nominated for an Emmy for Outstanding Performance by an actress in a supporting role in a comedy. Though she didn't win, the nomination confirmed her as one of TV's most respected character actresses. The Beverly Hillbillies aired for 9 seasons, with 274 episodes in total. While audiences loved the show, critics often dismissed it as too corny. Ebsen didn't mind. In a 1969 interview, he explained, "We were designed to be corny. That was part of our charm." His portrayal of Jed Clampett balanced the character's simplicity with a quiet wisdom, grounding the show's wilder moments. Meanwhile, Nancy Kulp and Buddy Ebsen had very different personalities, and this affected their work on the Beverly Hillbillies. Kulp, who played Miss Jane Hathaway, was smart and serious. She worked very hard on her acting, spending a lot of time preparing and perfecting every detail. Buddy Ebsen, on the other hand, was more relaxed. He had experience in vaudeville and Broadway, and he liked to improvise his lines. His folksy style as Jed Clampett made people love him, but it also caused tension with Kulp, who preferred everything to be well planned. Kulp would arrive early on set, always ready with her lines memorized, while Ebsen often made last-minute changes to the script. This sometimes frustrated Kulp. One time in 1965, she walked off the set because Ebsen improvised an entire scene without following the script. The show's creator, Paul Henning, had to step in to calm things down. Even though they worked differently, their acting styles balanced each other out. Kulp's precise delivery and Ebsen's natural charm helped make the show successful. Their political views made things even more complicated. Kulp was a strong Democrat, and Ebsen was a Republican. They often argued about big issues of the 1960s, like civil rights and the Vietnam War. On the day President Kennedy was assassinated, their political differences led to a long and heated debate on set. Another time, during the 1965 Watts riots, they argued for 3 days. Kulp would wear campaign buttons supporting Democratic candidates, and Ebsen would counter by leaving Republican flyers in the break room. Their debates sometimes delayed filming, like in 1968 when they argued over Nixon and Humphrey during the presidential campaign. The writers even used their off-screen differences in the show. In one episode, Jed and Miss Jane had a debate about tradition versus progress, reflecting some of their real-life arguments. These moments added depth to the show, and audiences loved the dynamic between their characters. One episode in 1964, Jed Buys the Freeway, had especially high ratings because of this. Despite the tensions, Kulp and Ebsen managed to stay professional. They developed a system to make their scenes work smoothly. For example, Ebsen would give a slight nod to let Kulp know he was about to improvise, and she would adjust her performance to match him. This unspoken teamwork kept the show running smoothly. In interviews, they even praised each other. Kulp said Ebsen made Jed lovable, and Ebsen wrote in his autobiography that Kulp's portrayal of Miss Jane was essential to the show's success. Even with their differences, they worked well when it mattered. At public events, they appeared as a team, joking about their personalities. During a 1969 interview on The Mike Douglas Show, Kulp joked, "Buddy and I are like oil and water. We shouldn't mix, but somehow we make a great salad dressing." After the Beverly Hillbillies, Nancy Kulp and Buddy Ebsen followed very different paths in their careers. These differences showed how they approached the entertainment world in unique ways. Nancy Kulp was always someone who valued learning and new experiences. In 1983, she made a surprising move by becoming an artist-in-residence at Juniata College in Pennsylvania. This wasn't something many Hollywood actors did. At the college, she taught classes about drama and film history. One of her courses, called The Evolution of the Sitcom, became very popular. Even today, people studying film use her ideas from that course. At the same time, Kulp kept acting but chose her roles carefully. In 1985, she starred in an independent film called The Undergrad. She played a retired professor who goes back to college. The movie didn't make much money, but critics loved her performance. She even won a Best Actress award at the Sundance Film Festival. This success made her love indie films even more. During the late 1980s, she acted in several low-budget films that earned a lot of praise, even if they weren't big hits. Buddy Ebsen, on the other hand, took his career in a completely different direction. After gaining more fame from his show Barnaby Jones, he explored other parts of entertainment. In 1981, he surprised fans by releasing a country music album called Buddy Ebsen Says Howdy. The album included classic country songs and some of his own work. It did well, reaching number 22 on the Billboard country charts. One song, Back to the Hills, was a duet with Willie Nelson and became a hit, reaching number 15 on the country singles chart. In 1984, Ebsen tried something new by doing voice acting for the animated movie The Secret of NIMH. He played Nicodemus, which opened the door for more animated roles. From 1986 to 1987, he even voiced a character in the cartoon The Pound Puppies, a favorite for kids at the time. The biggest surprise came in 1988, when Kulp and Ebsen found themselves on opposite sides of a political campaign. Nancy Kulp decided to run for Congress in 1984 because she wanted to make a real difference. This wasn't a sudden idea. It started on July 12, 1983, when she went to a Democratic fundraiser in Altoona, Pennsylvania. There, a congressman named Doug Walgren told her she should think about running for office. Nancy spent the next 6 months deciding. She researched the problems in Pennsylvania's 9th District and talked to local leaders and experts. Finally, on January 15, 1984, she announced she would run at a courthouse in Juniata County. Running as a Democrat was a big move because most people in the district were Republicans. Nancy herself had been a Republican for most of her life, but changed to the Democratic Party on November 2, 1983. Some people accused her of switching sides just to win, but Nancy explained her reasons. She said her values hadn't changed, but the Republican Party had become too extreme. She believed the Democrats were a better choice for working-class people in Pennsylvania. Nancy was 62 years old when she started her campaign, and many doubted her because of her age and lack of political experience. But she used this to her advantage. In a speech at the Huntingdon County Fair on April 18, 1984, she told people, "I'm new to politics, but not to life. I've spent my whole life listening to people's hopes and fears, and I'm ready to speak for them in Washington." When Nancy started her campaign, she hoped her old Hollywood friends would help. At first, things looked good. On February 3, 1984, Ed Asner, the president of the Screen Actors Guild, hosted a fundraiser for her at his home in Los Angeles. The event raised $28,000 and had famous guests like Betty White and Valerie Harper. Ed praised Nancy for her honesty and dedication, which got a lot of attention. But not everyone was praising. In October 1984, just before the election, Buddy Ebsen surprised everyone. He supported Bud Shuster, the Republican opponent of Nancy Kulp. This was shocking because Kulp had worked with Ebsen for 9 years on the Beverly Hillbillies. Ebsen lived in California and had no connection to Pennsylvania, where the election was happening. But he didn't just quietly support Shuster. Ebsen recorded a radio ad that played over and over in central Pennsylvania. In the ad, Ebsen used his famous Jed Clampett voice. He started by saying, "Howdy, this is Buddy Ebsen. You might remember me as Jed Clampett on the Beverly Hillbillies." Then he criticized Kulp, saying she was too liberal for the district. He joked, "Nancy may play a smart banker on TV, but her ideas about big government spending and less military defense are downright silly." He added, "Hey, Nancy, I love you dearly, but you're too liberal for me. I've got to go with Bud Shuster." The ad got personal. Ebsen said Kulp had lived in Hollywood too long and didn't understand the hard-working people of Pennsylvania. He criticized her support for environmental regulations and higher taxes, which voters in the district didn't like. The ad aired 147 times in 2 weeks on local radio stations. Almost everyone who was likely to vote heard it, many more than once. Because Ebsen was famous, his words carried a lot of weight. People started to see Kulp as an outsider with Hollywood values, which hurt her campaign. Ebsen ended the ad with a jab. On November 6th, vote for a real Pennsylvanian. Vote for Bud Schuster. This was painful for Kulp because she was actually born and raised in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Ebsen, on the other hand, had never lived there. When Kulp heard about the ad on October 4th, she was devastated. She was at a diner in Altoona when a supporter played it for her on a small radio. People who were there said her hands were shaking as she listened. Later that day, Kulp made a statement. She said she was disappointed and called Ebsen's words misleading and hurtful, not just to her, but to voters. As the days went on, Kulp couldn't hide how much the ad upset her. On October 7th, she told a local newspaper that Ebsen wasn't like the kind, homespun Jed Clampett people saw on TV. She said his attack felt like a betrayal of their time working together. She admitted they had often argued about politics, but she never thought he would turn on her like this. At a press conference on October 12th, Kulp went further. She said, "Jed Clampett would never have done something so mean-spirited." She also said, "I may have played his secretary on TV, but I never signed up to be his punching bag." For the rest of the campaign, Kulp tried to fight back. At every event, she reminded people that she wasn't running as a celebrity. She said, "I'm not Miss Hathaway. I'm Nancy Kulp, a proud Pennsylvanian with real solutions for our district." But by then, the damage was done. When Kulp lost the election, she gave a short speech on November 7. She didn't congratulate Schuster or mention Ebsen. Instead, she said, "I may have lost this race, but I haven't lost my integrity. I ran an honest campaign, and I'm proud of that." Years later, Kulp still talked about what happened with sadness. In her last interview before her death in 1991, she said, "What Buddy did was cruel and unnecessary. 9 years of working together were overshadowed by a 60-second ad. I never would have done that to him, no matter what."